Welcome, everybody. We're so excited to have you here. My name is Kate, and I am one of the, about to be not the co-chair, but one of the current co-chairs of the Student Mentor Mixer Committee. Mitchell, if you just want to give a quick hi as well.
Hello.
So Mitchell is the other co-chair, but then we've had some really great help in putting this event on with Lauren Wisbrock, I think that's how you say your last name, Lauren. I apologize if it's not. And then also Sam, if Sam wants to give a wave. We're the ones that have been putting this event on. We're super excited that you're here to join us. I do want to invite everyone to actually turn your video on. You do not have to if you don't want to. If you're in your PJs and you don't want anyone to see it, that's totally fine. But it kind of makes it a little bit more personal. We didn't do it last time, and I felt like it would be nice if we did. All right, so some of you might have had the opportunity to come to our first panel, and if you did, thank you. We're really excited about this one, but I'm gonna give the same kind of spiel just because not everyone was necessarily there, and I wanna make sure you know what to expect. So this happy hour, we are going to be hearing from 6 different freshwater science professionals who hold positions across different sectors on both their experiences in freshwater science, but also within our society. And then we're gonna follow up this event with another open Twitter chat this Friday, starting at 11 a.m. The lunch chat is open to everyone, members, non-members. It doesn't matter who you are, please join it. And before we get started, I wanna take a minute to explain the format and the expectations we have for the panel. For the first half, I'm gonna be moderating. Again, my name is Kate. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Georgia in Seth Wenger and Amy Roseman's labs. And I'm gonna ask the students, or excuse me, ask the panelists to introduce themselves and then ask some pre-prepared questions that they've gotten in advance. As we're asking these questions, students, we ask that you start to put your questions in the chat. So we're gonna use these questions in the second half where Mitchell is going to collect them, and he's going to call on you to ask your question directly to the panelist. Please keep on submitting them throughout the entire hour because we're going to use those for the happy hour, the Twitter lunch chat that's going to happen this Friday. And now I kind of want to go over our expectations really quickly. I want to remind everyone to please abide by the Society for Freshwater Science Code of Conduct. And I want to specifically reiterate the expectation that we all communicate openly with respect and consideration for others, valuing a diversity of viewpoints and opinions. So we've invited panelists here to speak about their individual journeys, and panelists, thank you for being willing to be here and engage in conversation. But we also want to take a moment to acknowledge that people with different identities have had different experiences within their professions and as SFS members. The recent Black in the Ivory tweets, for instance, have exposed many racist experiences by Black academics that they've been subjected to. And for those of you that have not seen those tweets, I encourage you to read them. Our panelists likely cannot speak to all of these experiences, and we'll go ahead and say now, panelists, I do not expect you to speak about experiences that aren't yours. We encourage everyone to speak from their own experiences using I statements where applicable, and to keep in mind that others may face additional or different hurdles in their careers. As we learn and grow as a society, we look forward to hearing and incorporating and amplifying even more perspectives in our student mentor events. And if anyone, students or panelists, have concerns regarding any of the events that you've participated in or seen on Twitter, please let us know. All right, so that's my spiel, all the things that we kind of just wanted to set it up. Thank you guys for letting me go through that. Thank you all. So with that, we're going to start the Diverse Career Paths Happy Hour panel. And our goal this week is to provide all the students with an understanding of what careers can look like across multiple sectors, and also opportunities for y'all to meet these specific individuals and hopefully add them to your professional network. So I'm going to start with introductions, and I'm going to ask all of the panelists that I introduce to tell us a little bit more about yourself. Please tell us what perspectives you bring to the table, and then also your journey to your current position. And you know, we always say, please keep them to 1 to 2 minutes. It never happens, but don't be offended if I cut you off. I probably won't do that, but I'm going to start with Alyssa, who is currently in a teaching focused position as assistant professor of biology at Southwest Minnesota State University, which you've described as a primarily undergrad institution. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and your path to this position, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for coming to this happy hour. Good group of you, it looks like. So, yeah, so I'm at a primarily undergraduate institution in Southwest Minnesota. We have about 3,000 students or so. And I've been in this position for about 2 years now, just completed my second year at SMSU. Prior to that, if we back up a little bit, I got my PhD from the University of Minnesota in 2012 and went right from there into a teaching position at Northern State University in Aberdeen, South Dakota, a really similar position to what I'm in now. That was also a primary teaching focused position. There I was teaching courses in organismal biology and ecology, aquatic ecology and entomology are kind of my specialties. This is the case with a lot of you guys, I'm sure too. So I was teaching those courses as well as a suite of many other courses. I think when I was at Northern, I taught a total of 11 different courses ranging from vertebrate zoology, invertebrate zoology, general biology, intro biology for non-majors, evolution. So things that weren't necessarily, you know, right up there in my wheelhouse. So I was at Northern for about 6 years and had an opportunity to move about 3 hours east to Minnesota, kind of near my stomping grounds and a little closer to family. So I jumped on that opportunity. It was a good move, both professionally and personally. SMSU, where I'm at now, is really similar in terms of the type of position, and my teaching obligations are also quite similar. I'm their primarily ecologist and organismal biologist. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. I think that's probably about my 2-minute limit, so.
Awesome, thank you. And I believe that you recently had an NSTARS student that was just featured on the SFS Twitter page, right?
You know, I haven't seen that on the Twitter page, but yes, I've had 2 of my past students. I'm not up on Twitter. I should be, I know, but
no shame there. No shame there. Awesome.
2 of my students from Northern were NSTARS, and one actually participated twice. Tessa, I don't think she's in the room now, but yeah.
Awesome. All right, so next I'm going to introduce and call on Checo, who is an associate professor of biology and currently the graduate program director at Georgia Southern University, which is an R2 institution that offers master's level graduate studies in biology. Checo, if you'll tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey.
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me well? You go like this? Yeah, a lot of shaking heads. This is exciting. It's exciting to be here because I remember coming to these things as a student SFS member, and probably is part of the reason those meetings while I'm in my position today. As Kate described, I'm in an academic position in probably a mid-tier research and teaching institution at Georgia Southern University. We have a master's program. We don't have PhDs, but we do have a pretty large undergraduate component. As far as my journey to get here, after completing a bachelor's in biology, I pursued a master's first. I was thinking of a career more perhaps in conservation and management. So I pursued a master's in fisheries at Louisiana State University. And while I was there, as I was finishing my master's and starting to look for jobs and opportunities, I reached out to some professors that I have met as an undergraduate intern in RAU programs, and they encouraged me to pursue a PhD, which was accidentally probably the best thing that happened to me. I pursued a PhD at Southern Illinois University with Matt Wiles, who was a society president several years back. I spent a good bit of time working with Matt in the tropics, which is actually around my background. I'm originally from the island of Puerto Rico, and I did a lot of my PhD work in small streams in Central America, in Panama. when I was a PhD student, I found out that I really enjoyed teaching, mainly from participating as a TA. Most of my graduate student buddies, you know, they TA'd just like me, and I don't necessarily think that they all loved TAing as much as I did, and that really opened my eyes to opportunities in teaching. So when I was finishing my PhD, I started taking courses in education and courses in, I mean, even in pedagogy that were not necessarily offered towards my general zoology degree, mainly with the goal of transitioning towards an academic position. When I finished my PhD, I was fortunate enough to receive a postdoc fellowship from the NSF, where I went back to my island of Puerto Rico for about a year before I started applying for academic positions. I've been lucky enough that I've been here at Georgia Southern for 10 years. This has technically been my only job since finishing my PhD and my postdoc, which I think is a little rare, but it's been probably a very fortunate opportunity for me. I've grown in my position here to do a little bit of administration. I was explaining to the organizers that as of next week, I go through my last of my promotions in an academic position. I go to full professor after being tenured and being an associate professor. And starting next week, I'm going to be an administrator as an associate dean of the College of Graduate Studies. So two things that I've enjoyed between teaching and working with graduate students and working with students. Now I have the opportunity to probably be at a position to really help and structure the future of our graduate education here at my university. So a little, perhaps like not plan pathway. I mean, I knew I liked doing research. I knew I wanted to be an institution that valued research. I found out that I was really happy and comfortable mentoring master's students, and maybe a little bit more nervous about mentoring PhD students. I think maybe that's still something that I feel maybe fortunate that I didn't get a chance to do, at least just yet in my institution. But yeah, but hopefully could talk a little bit about that, career choices and how that structured my pathway into maybe something more in administration. And now, for those of you that don't know, starting, I guess, last week or 2 weeks ago, I'm the vice president of the society. So happy to contribute in that way as well.
Awesome, thank you. Can you also check out, I know that we have some undergraduates in the audience. Can you very quickly tell us what an REU is in case people don't all know?
So yeah, so as an undergraduate, I did summer internships in the National Science Foundation has a program called the Research Experiences for Undergraduates. And it's technically 10-week internships in the summer where you get not just paid to do research with faculty mentors, but additionally, they tend to cover your housing and your travel to the facilities or to the institution. And not only was I lucky to do that, but now I have my own REU site here at Georgia Southern University. So for those of you that are undergraduates and still not graduating here in the next year, definitely look us up. We have an REU in coastal plain science and a lot of river work in the coastal plain of the Southeast.
Awesome, thank you. And I will also add to that, from our lunch chats that occurred last week, we had a question that someone put into the chat about a memorable or momentous, I can't remember, Shannon, I think it was your question about like, what was a pivotal moment that put you on the trajectory that you went to today? And a number of people mentioned their REU experiences.
Definitely, yeah.
And so I didn't personally get to do one. I almost got to do one in Puerto Rico, and I was very sad. I was talked to and didn't get it. But everyone I know that did one has really talked about how awesome that experience was. So.
Definitely. Met my PhD advisor at my REU, and hopefully that's the experience that some of the REU students that are working with us now get the opportunity to think about that as a pathway for what graduate school and graduate life might be like.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so now we're gonna switch from academia to a federal agency, and I'm going to call on KathiJo, who is a research ecologist with the United States Geological Survey in Wisconsin. KathiJo, if you'll tell us a bit more about yourself.
Cool, can you hear me okay? Yep, okay, good. Yes, hello. It's great to see all of you. I do like having the video. That's really nice. She's correct, I'm a research ecologist with the U.S. Geological Survey in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I'm at one of the, it's at the Upper Midwest Environmental Sciences Center, which is one of the USGS ecosystem centers. You might be familiar with all the water science centers that run all the gauges around the country. So there's basically one of those in each state, and then there's maybe 15 ecosystem centers, and I'm at one of those. So I bring, in terms of the perspective I bring, I'm a scientist at a federal agency, which is distinct in certain ways from being a scientist at a state agency. We can think across state boundaries and across sometimes national boundaries. So I like it in that sense. I have a research position. It's a research grade evaluation position. So I'm evaluated in a very similar way to tenure track professors with a little bit of a different focus. So rather than teaching, we're evaluated on our scientific output, but also how well we're providing science for partners and to inform management. So that's a really big part of my position, is sort of what am I doing for society and how am I helping people make decisions. In terms of how I got here, I always feel like we always have long and meandering paths, so I won't torture you with that. But as an undergraduate, I was an environmental science and anthropology major because I always wanted to get at that link between the environment and humans. Sort of, how does what we do impact the environment we live in, and how humans need the environment to survive. So I kind of started there, and then bopped around and through many different sectors. I worked with the Nature Conservancy right after college and spent some time in Chile working with them. So sort of the nonprofit conservation route. Then I decided, well, I think I want more science to what I'm doing. So I did a master's degree in biology. And I think I had a very similar thought to Checo of, I think I want to do something that's applied, and I want to, be sort of on the ground and informing decisions. But after I did that, I ended up working in an outreach position with the University of Vermont, and realized I wanted a little bit more quantitative and broader skill set. So I went back and got a PhD and learned a lot more modeling and statistics, and did some broader scale questions as part of that. And this is the last part. I know I'm talking long, but after my PhD, that was at the University of Washington, and I worked in Alaska, and then I got a postdoc position with the Marine Biological Lab, and which is a soft money research institution, and it was a very research focused PhD or postdoc, and so I think the combination of some of my outreach experience as well as the more research focus fits well with my current position as a scientist focused on helping people make decisions.
Awesome, thank you. And correct me if I'm wrong, but soft money is referring to money coming in on grants and whatnot, correct?
Yeah, so people, mostly I think up to 90% or 100% of people's salaries was all based on grant funding.
Gotcha. And I take back my threat of cutting people off. Y'all are fine. This is the important part of actually introducing yourselves, so people kind of know where you've been. So I take it back. I'm not going to cut you off. Just please don't go 15 minutes. That was totally within reason. All right, so next up, we're actually going to hear from someone that currently works with the Nature Conservancy, which I too actually worked with the Nature Conservancy right outside of college. So there's a couple of us here. So this, I'm going to call on Krista, who's an aquatic ecologist for the Illinois chapter of the Nature Conservancy, which, if you don't know, is an international environmental organization. So Krista, if you'll jump on and tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Thank you. And it's so great that there's already 2 people that have like tested the waters of Nature Conservancy. So hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining in today. And like Checo said, I do remember back in the day participating in these as well. So it's interesting to be on the other side of the table. So one day this may happen to you too. And I did want to actually do a little shout out to Checo. I don't know if you remember me, but we used to hang out at prior NABS back then meetings, probably between the 2003 and 2008 area. So anyway, but yeah, so I've been working for the Nature Conservancy for 13 years actually. So my path has been a little different. I actually went straight from my master's to working full time for the Nature Conservancy. So I've been involved with the Illinois chapter specifically, and my role is a little different in the fact that most of the science staff or even conservation staff for the Nature Conservancy tend to work in a very broad sense. There's a ton of partnerships, there's a lot of collaboration. We're really just trying to figure out the best way to conserve natural areas or work with partners to create big projects that have that overarching goal. In the work that I'm doing in central Illinois, we really don't have any natural areas. This is very much corn and soybean territory. So we're working on specifically water quality and how can we help farmers still create good yields, but still reduce the runoff that's coming through our watersheds. And so Illinois and Iowa tend to fight based on which state contributes the most nitrogen and phosphorus, which is a title we're not very happy about. But it takes a huge amount of partnership to really figure out what works. And so I will say that my role currently is not so much into the day-to-day science so much anymore. I still am the lead technician. I'm fortunate to still be able to go outside. I do all the water quality sampling. I do a lot of stormwater monitoring, things like that, which I'm grateful to still be doing at this point after 13 years. But a lot of my role is also partnership. So we work with partners, whether it's landowners to county officials, to federal officials, to just a lot of universities. It really takes a big team to make a difference in these projects. And also I work on very long-term projects. I've been working on a paired watershed study that's going on its 20th year, believe it or not. So having that consistency to be able to have the same person that the landowner's dealing with and the same partnerships in place has really been key. So I'm grateful for that. I'll go backwards a little bit. I will also give a shout out for REU programs. I took advantage of those as well when I did my undergraduate at Eastern Illinois University. So I did my first one let me take it back. I actually did my first internship at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign through the Howard Hughes Fellowship Program. It might have changed its name by then, but that was my first exposure to doing on-site research, and I got partnered with the Natural History Survey back then to do some work on walleye diet shifts, which was really cool. So I got to work with a person who was doing their PhD work and got to learn what it's like to, sit for hours watching fish in tanks and what that really takes to get the data that you need. It's that tedious work. But I also got to play out in the field a few times. But then I took an REU through the University of Arizona, but I got placed up in Flagstaff. And that was a really wonderful experience for me because it got me the opportunity to live somewhere completely differently. I also did not have electricity or consistent running water. So it was just a very different experience in general, but it really was wonderful. It really was kind of groundbreaking for me as just to build up your resilience, but also just to be able to know that you can move around and do different things. So I've done some work with fishes, a little bit with invertebrates, and then I did my master's work specifically on algae, and now my work pretty much just revolves around nitrogen and phosphorus within these systems. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. So now we're gonna go to a different nonprofit, and I'm going to introduce Deanna, who is an assistant research scientist at the Stroud Water Research Center in Pennsylvania, which is a nonprofit focused on global research, education, and watershed restoration.
Hi, everybody. So very nice to see you all here. I'm very excited to see some familiar faces too. So, and yeah, thanks, Kate, for organizing and for inviting me. So I have been at the Stroud Center for about 3 years now. I am from Costa Rica originally and did my bachelor's actually in Costa Rica. I'm a chemist and decided to come to the US for my graduate, to go to graduate school. And so at the that was in 2008. So I've been in the US for about 12 years now. I went to Indiana University for my master's and PhD, and that was in environmental science. So it was actually a very exciting time going from a very, very exact science, like very chemistry, moving into environmental science, and being able to apply my chemistry knowledge into environmental science was really exciting. Like my favorite class whatsoever is limnology, and I like remember being so excited about like, oh wow, all this stuff that I didn't think it was ever going to be worth learning is actually very important. So that was a good experience. Then after that, I worked as a postdoc at North Carolina State University. I actually worked on 2 different projects while I was there. One was more related to carbon cycle in the tropics, and I had this awesome opportunity to actually go back to Costa Rica and do my field work there for that project. And then for another 2 years, I worked on a project related to blue carbon, so carbon that is stored in coastal wetlands. And so that was really a very nice experience too. Very different environments, very different ecosystems. But my work has, for the most part, being about carbon cycling, dissolved organic matter, particulate organic matter, greenhouse gases, that kind of stuff. So here I am in a position that is called assistant research scientist. Stroud Center works somewhat similar to a university in the sense that we do have like something similar to a tenure track position. I don't have to teach, so most of almost entirely my duties are research. But we do have the opportunity, we have a class that we teach at Penn State, at University of Pennsylvania, which is very nice, especially because it's not just me, but it's the team of scientists at the Stroud Center. So we divide among us, and it is very nice because it's not as much a responsibility as if you're teaching the full class on your own. I do like teaching, and I did a lot of that while I was actually a student, as a PhD student. For the last 2 years of my PhD, I taught, so I took over part of my education. And then, but having that class at Penn helps, just having that connection with the students. It's not as much responsibility. We do have, I wanted just to mention, we do have programs for receive REU students, and a lot of our interns in many different programs. So if you guys are interested, check out our website. Unfortunately, this year was a weird year, just for everything else. But I have had 2 REU students so far, and it's been great. I have had really great experiences with them, and hopefully they did too. I'm missing something. Okay, I forgot. So I'll come back.
You're fine.
Okay.
Absolutely fine. Thank you. And then last but not least, I'm going to introduce Mike, who is a senior scientist and director for Tetra Tech, Inc. He's in North Carolina, but I believe this is a very international organization, a public sector consulting business. So Mike, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kate. So I work for Tetra Tech, which is a large international engineering firm focused on water, and I'm an environmental consultant. It is a private sector firm, but I work for public sector clients. So all of my clients are 90% of the work I do is for the Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the other 10 to 20% of what I do is for state agencies. So we have contracts with the state of Mississippi and Utah, helping them with all the water quality regulatory programs they work with. What I describe what I do as evidence-based decision-making and regulatory support. So when policymakers are going to make decisions and they need an analysis to evaluate risks of certain decisions, we analyze the data to do that. We also build a lot of tools biological indices. We work on nutrient criteria at the national level, so we help do analyses to help build nutrient criteria to protect water from turning green. I do a lot of climate research support, or did before the last election. Now I don't do much climate research. Hopefully we'll be doing it again after November. And then a lot of what I do is research services support. So we have a large contract with EPA's Office of Research and Development, and so that anything research related that's not in the laboratory, we do it. So literature searches, systematic reviews, data analysis, database construction, writing peer-reviewed manuscripts, writing technical reports, delivering briefing documents to management, things like that. My path was very unexpected. I didn't go into graduate school thinking, I certainly didn't go into a PhD thinking what I want to do is become a consultant. Quite honestly, I'm one of those people who doesn't really think there is a path. It just sort of unrolls in front of you. We ended up going to Baltimore because I didn't want to live apart from my partner, and she was going to law school in Maryland. So I applied for academic jobs and didn't find one after. So I did, my undergrad was with Randy Fuller at Colgate University. He's the one who turned me on to streams. And then I went to the greatest university in the United States, the University of Georgia, where Kate is, to the Institute of Ecology, and worked with Judy Meyer there. And when Seth Wenger and Amy Roseman were still students, Seth being a younger student than me at the time. And then I did a postdoc there in geography doing fluvial geomorphology. And then, so I couldn't find an academic job. We were in Maryland, and a friend who worked for EPA, who was a grad student at University of Georgia, who was working with EPA at that point, said, you should try this firm, Tetra Tech, and see what, they need an urban stream ecologist, and that's what I was doing at the time. So, and still do. So I said, oh, okay, I'll do that for a couple of years until she finishes law school, and then we'll figure it out. She finished law school. I applied and got a teaching job at Howard University in DC and did the assistant professor thing for a few years and decided I did not like academia, that I was a lot happier and had a better life-work balance, believe it or not, in consulting than I did in academia. And I loved teaching. That's what I missed the most. I really enjoyed teaching, but I didn't like the research focus, and I can talk about that when we get into defining requirements, but and I didn't like all the committee stuff and the politics and stuff. It's just driving me nuts. So I went back to consulting. I was lucky enough for them to accept me back, and that was 17 years ago. So total, I've been at Tetra Tech for 20 years. It's been a long time, but it was not an expected path. It was never on my radar, but it's turned out to be a really good career. I've been able to be involved in a lot of national rule-making things for nutrient criteria for waters of the United States, helping with the science on that. That has been really rewarding. I think that that's unique, and I'm glad Kate said, you know, we're speaking for ourselves, because people ask me, so what's consulting like? I can only tell you what working at a Tetra Tech, who does public sector consulting for the EPA and state agencies, is like, and that's very rewarding. That's a very different experience from small local consulting firm type work, which I can't speak to. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think people might have touched on this a little bit, and I do, before I go into another question, I wanted to let folks know that we are most likely we're gonna stay on a little bit past 7. So we will have time for open-ended questions. Everyone doesn't have to stay. If you want to, go for it. Drink whatever drink you're drinking, get comfortable. We just really wanna continue the conversation. So back to the question, I was going to say, you might have answered a little bit of this, so everyone actually doesn't need to answer if you feel like you spoke to it. But one of the things I'd like to really hear about is what you think the defining requirements of your position are. I know we can all read a position description, but they don't always give you a good understanding of the real points that you're required to do in that job. And then likewise, how you feel like you meet those, like what either personality traits or skills that you've learned to really meet those requirements. So if anyone wants to jump in, do it.
I'll go first. I don't think I really touched on my specific role very much when I introduced myself. So I'll sort of touch on that and then talk about the requirements I see for those different parts of my role. But So in my position now, I am as I said, I'm a research ecologist, but I'm a PI for as part of a large partnership program. I'm the PI for this water quality monitoring component of that large partnership. I work specifically on the upper Mississippi River as part of a sort of joint restoration and monitoring program, which is co-operated by the USGS, the Army Corps of Engineers, 5 state agencies, and then I think partially by the US EPA, Fish and Wildlife Service, and USDA. So it's a huge partnership program, all focused on restoration, monitoring, and science on the upper Mississippi River. So my role in that is to oversee the water quality component. So I oversee monitoring, which takes place at 6 field stations along the upper Mississippi River. So I help oversee the data quality, the data collection, field methods, making sure the data is made public, all those components of that, and working with state field stations to make that happen. So that is one component of my job. Another, probably at least 50% of my job is science, and I sort of break that down into 2 components. So one is research to inform restoration and management on the river. So projects that are really directed at sort of, where should we restore, how do we understand how the river functions well enough to understand if this restoration project is going to work, things like that. And then I also have the freedom to explore questions that are more ecologically focused. So just sort of river ecology in a more general sense. I'm a biogeochemist, ecosystem ecologist, so I can think about questions sort of in that realm across large rivers and work with diverse colleagues in that sense. So I think somebody asked sort of, do I have freedom to choose what I work on? And that's it's like Mike said, a position in the USGS is also, they can be highly variable depending on what center you're at or what program you're part of. I personally do have a fair bit of freedom to work on different questions as long as I can either find the time or find the money. So I think that is a big component of it. So if I can find money to fund a project or money to fund a person, as long as it has to do with something that's relevant to large river ecology, or especially if answers some questions relevant to management of the upper Mississippi, I have freedom to work on that. So that's pretty cool. And then I'll just say the last part of my job is more of like an outreach, partnership, mentorship role. Because we're part of such a huge partnership, there's a lot of time that I spend going to meetings with other people that work on the river. So for example, the Nature Conservancy, there's definitely work in the region by the Nature Conservancy. So we work with, and there's a lot of sort of partnership organizations, either of managers or of conservation groups or activists. And so there's a lot of different groups to participate in as a scientist that I can either add some perspective or learn what the science needs are and sort of where USGS could fit into sort of addressing those information needs that partnerships are identified to take. And I also, I do work some with students. A lot of USGS scientists can have an adjunct faculty role. And so either serve on committees or be an advisor to students. And so I currently am actually helping oversee some REU projects. And so let's bring that full circle. But I guess, and I'll just end by saying, I guess in terms of skills, I think all of the skills that I learned in my science training come into play in all parts of my job. So learning, planning field work, that definitely plays a role in sort of my ability to help make field plans and things like that. My science training in terms of quantitative approaches and sort of designing studies and sort of that kind of thing. I think two that I would highlight besides that are just data management skills and data visualization. I feel like I've had to really up my game in the last few years, just because a big part of my job is making that data available and understandable by our partners. And so I think that is a skill that I see as ever increasing as being important. And then lastly, science communication. So given the fact that I'm communicating with a huge diversity of audiences, I think learning how to do that effectively is important and an ongoing skill set that I am working on acquiring. So there's my long answer.
Awesome, thank you. Does anybody else want to jump in with, especially the skills part of that question? Skills that have really been necessary for meeting the requirements of the jobs y'all have described.
So in my job, I, like KathiJo, is an ecosystem ecologist, and I think that served me well. In my job, I need to be really broadly trained. So one of the things I like about my job, and what when people ask me about a career in consulting, I say, if you're one of those people that's really consumed with one question, like you're really interested in this, genus of mayfly, or this one behavioral, the ecology around this one behavior, consulting is not going to be a good decision for you, because this week I was talking about the alley effect, nutrient spiraling, and population ecology. So it was like in any given completely different project I'm working on, because the clients have really diverse needs, and we're not driving what we do, we're responding to what our clients' needs are. So if consulting is an interest of you, try and get as much broad training as you can in a lot of different areas. My short attention span was a liability in graduate school. It's been an asset in consulting. So broad ecosystem, broad scientific training, and broad interest in a lot of areas for my type of work is really beneficial. And I would just echo what KathiJo said about communication skills, data management, and analytical skills. Absolutely top of the heap.
I'm seeing a lot of head nods on the SciComm and everything else. Does anyone, Checo or Alyssa, do you want to speak to the skills of mentoring? Alyssa, I saw your hand go up.
Sure. Yeah, I'll kind of echo Mike. Being adaptable and kind of a jack of all trades is really important in terms of teaching at a PUI, a primarily undergraduate institution too. Like I said, I've taught, about 11 different courses, and a lot of those are not at all related to aquatic ecology or entomology. So really being adaptable to meet needs of the department of the university is a key requirement, and being comfortable stepping out of your wheelhouse a little bit. In terms of my position description, I'd say about 80% of my obligations are related to teaching in some way. And that could be mentoring students. And that's really what attracted me to a position at an undergraduate institution. When I was an undergrad, I had an opportunity to do research with faculty during the summers, and didn't do an RU, but did similar experiences at LTERs, long-term ecological research stations. And had awesome experiences working with faculty, so I wanted to be that person. So along with teaching, I try to provide meaningful research experiences to undergrads, whether that's embedding them in courses, doing semester-long projects, which sometimes turn into multi-year projects, or doing independent research during the semester, during the summer. One of my students, Tessa, I worked with her as an undergrad for a few years, and she attended a couple of SFS meetings with me, and is now working actually with my PhD advisor. So really cool to kind of watch that trajectory from undergraduate student to graduate student, and see where those students go. Let's see, Kate, I know you asked something else in there and I veered off track. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I have multiple screens going on and it was just floating all over my monitor. So I'm going to switch gears to my last question, then we're going to do some of these questions that are coming in. And probably won't get to everyone with this, but I really love this question, which is, can you speak to something that you screwed up? So we really see all the professionals and we go, oh, look at all the amazing things they've done. Look how important they sound. Look at all these publications they have, or all the people they've helped and the projects they've managed. And it gets really intimidating. And so I like to humanize everyone and highlight all the things you did wrong. No, I just really want to know about that process, which is, can you speak to some of the missteps or failures along your career path? Whoever wants to jump in, especially if you didn't get to answer that last one, feel free to. Go for it, Checo.
So I'll try to mix this one a little bit with the last one. So I think, not to be cliche, but in every position, I mean, you're going to need a little bit of patience, perseverance, and for me, always a sense of humor, because there are things that you do screw up, and there are things that it takes a while to get them to go well. For me, early in my position, I probably thought that everybody that I was teaching was going to become an aquatic ecologist or stream ecologist, and that's just, probably 1% or less of my students will end up doing the type of things that I'm doing. So I had to think about my role in either teaching or mentoring students to be a little bigger than to train them to be what we are, or people that frequent the society. They're really going to be citizens that are going to be responsible for having this knowledge and turning them into their own profession. So being very patient with my teaching and obviously with research that I started initially was a big growing moment for me to kind of understand that those things take time, and probably like being collaborative from the beginning. And Alyssa mentioned this, and I know KathiJo and also Mike. I mean, you really have to be very willing to collaborate with folks and have a bigger picture sense of what you're doing. And I think most of the experiences that I had that have been successful was really by letting others be part of the process and letting others be part of the approach, including students, not just colleagues, not just other professionals. I think just everybody that could contribute should have a part in the game. So that was one for me.
Anyone else want to jump in there? Go for it, Krista.
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, I will also combine the last question with this one a little bit as well. I think the one thing, everybody had great responses. I totally agree with that, because you just don't know, first of all, where your career path will go, and you also don't know who you're going to be working with, and you don't know exactly just how things will play out. So you need to have a lot of openness, and I would really like to emphasize flexibility as well, because like in the role that I work in for a nonprofit, but a very large nonprofit. So we're working with a ton of different partners, but we also have to answer to funders. So whether that's a grant or whether that's a private funder, there's going to be a lot of needs and asks coming from you. So you may be knee deep working in a stream, for example, but then I have to turn around and take a train to Chicago and be there for a big gala. Like, that has literally happened. So you definitely have to make sure that you just keep open to knowing that your schedule could be flipped on things with that, but also just on the opportunities, because sometimes you could meet someone randomly at a meeting and you end up having a similar idea about a workshop, and you can have really wonderful collaborations that way. And so it's just really important to stay open. And I also would encourage anybody to really take advantage of any sort of HR opportunities that you can get. So whether that's learning how to work in diverse arenas, whether that's learning how to have a very effective team, highly effective teams, learning to lead without authority, all these types of things, how to deal with conflicts, like these will go a long way, even in your own personal life. But we've had some difficult partnerships in some of our work, and really learning how they communicate and trying to understand why they want it are being a difficult partner. Sometimes, and that was one of our failures, we never quite figured out why a certain partner didn't want to team up, but it was really, we just had to work around it, but it was really a lot of understanding of where they were coming from. And we had to move on. And so that was just unfortunately how it goes. Not every partnership will work out, not every project will work out. So don't be afraid to fail, because it's going to happen, but make sure that you learn from those mistakes, and then you can move forward. I think that's really key.
I agree. Mitchell, is it time for us to switch over, or do we have one more answer? We
should probably go ahead and start
All
switching over. So, hi, for those of you who weren't here last week, I'm Mitchell Owens. I'm a PhD student at Indiana University in the Department of Geography. But I think today we're going to start, Lauren Pong asked a question, especially since a lot of you all mentioned REUs. This seemed very relevant. Lauren, would you like to ask your question if you are here?
Sure, can you hear me? Hi, Lou? Okay, my question was, during your undergrad years, besides REU, what other experiences greatly helped you in making connections and gaining experiences? So like if you're not able to participate in REU, like what else would you suggest aspiring water scientists do during their undergraduate years, that is?
Checo, go for it.
What you're doing right now, like if you have an opportunity, if you're like either working for a faculty member or volunteering in a lab and you have the opportunity to participate in conferences, this is probably like the biggest reward that we get as scientists. And for me, my experience with SFS has been probably the biggest network of scientists, of friends that you get to see once a year for a week and get excited about their work and what they do and what their students they're doing. So going to a conference and doing things like this is unbelievably, I guess, a successful way to expand your network and meet people and really learn about opportunities in either laboratories, graduate school, or even just work. So this that you're doing right now, keep doing it. This is important.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
Yeah, I'll echo Checo. Being here is awesome. And I'll leave it at that. I think, another thing I think that's important is, any way that you can be involved in any type of research experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be, freshwater ecology related, but just showing that you're willing to go out and get that research experience. You might be working with a faculty member on some sort of microbiology project or genetics project or whatever, but those experiences are going to build your resume. So reach out to your faculty and try to get involved in some way, and they might have connections that can get you into the door to that freshwater experience eventually as well, even if that's not in the cards right away. So just diversify your resume as much as you can. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I would say that in addition to REUs, like I spent a summer at a biological station. It wasn't an REU, it was a biostation, and it was transformative for me. I took Jack Webster's ecosystem ecology class, and it set me on my course. Not only it made me realize what type of ecology I really enjoyed doing and wanted to do, but he also put me in touch with the woman who would become my major professor, and he identified that would be, and it was that relationship I built that was transformative. But in addition, spending a summer with 50 other people who were passionate about the same thing I was passionate about, locked in a close environment at Flathead Lake, was just incredible. So if you get a chance to do a summer course or even a winter course, one month course at a biostation with a bunch of other really interested ecologists, it was really fun.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
After you.
Okay, one other, I definitely did summer internships. So I did, one summer with I was at a field station actually, which was awesome. It was at UNDERC. But one of my other summers, I applied for a position with the Nature Conservancy again, and they had a internship program that was run out of their office in DC. So I think anything you can, even if it's not research, I think getting broad experience in the freshwater field with your summers is a great way to increase your experience as well.
Diana, I know you mentioned something about this earlier, and you also added a link for Lauren in the chat for some opportunities. Did you have anything else you might want to say on this subject at all?
I put the link in there for the Stroud Center. Again, this is a weird year, and we're kind of late in the season, but check again next year. Hopefully it will be better. We do have a good amount of opportunities for internships through the REU or other ways too. So yeah.
Thank you. I'm gonna switch gears here, I think. Busy, if you are here, you had a question.
Hi. So I was asking a question kind of more directed to the people who aren't in academia, and I was wondering if you see a benefit in having a PhD in your field, and if you see a lot of your colleagues that also, if they have PhDs, or if they're okay with just masters, or even what different fields of study they might come from. So if they come from social sciences or specifically like all sciences.
I guess I'll jump in on that since I'm not academic. But I guess currently in my position, I think most of my colleagues have a PhD, especially the other scientists that I'm working with. So anybody that's in charge of projects or programs at this level would all have a PhD. But within the USGS, there's definitely a large range. And I think with a master's versus a PhD, you might have a different role. With a PhD, you would have your own lab or run your own projects, whereas with a master's, you might be part of a lab or assigned to a certain project. So your responsibility levels would be different, and sort of the scope of the types of things your scope and freedom would be different with a master's versus a PhD. But a lot of master's level people are still doing, they're in charge of projects and writing papers and doing research, but maybe just not needing to find the funding and run the lab and all that kind of stuff.
And I would say my group at Tetra Tech is a little unique again, and this is just a unique experience. We have 5 or 6 PhDs. We are encouraged to publish. We have like 300 plus publications in our group over the last 10 years. So it's a research active group. But I would say that and I was thinking about this while I was doing my fun run thing this week for SFS Fun Run. I would never say go get a PhD to go into consulting. Because a PhD is a really demanding, it's a really demanding process. It has to be something you're passionate about doing, a question that you're passionate about that's not answered in the scientific field that you feel, just a passion to answer. And because there's no real extra reward in the consulting field for having a PhD versus a master's. There are bachelor's degree people who have succeeded more, done more things, published more, earned more money, whatever, in consulting than PhDs do. Because there are intangible skills that have to do with marketing and business side of consulting that, maybe going after a PhD is inversely proportional to having those skills. I don't know. But I would encourage you, if consulting is an interest, get a master's. Most of the people in our thing have a master's degree. You need some advanced training and skills. But go try it for a few years. And then if you're really passionate about this question that you feel you need to answer, pursue a PhD, but you don't need it in the field that I'm in, for sure.
Go for it.
I just wanted to echo what Mike was saying. I didn't do it, but I think it is very important. I do recommend once you finish your master's, if you're not sure, or even when you finish your undergrad, go just get a job and do something related to that field, see how you like it before committing to, the next step. I think from what I've seen, other people who have had that opportunity, are able to enjoy, I think, more the PhD experience or the master's experience.
Yeah, and this is Krista. I'll chime in too that I think within Nature Conservancy, there's a pretty mixed bag of people that just have bachelor's, people that have master's, people have PhD. And I would say up until recently, there were certainly less PhDs. But that's changed a little bit, but it's really just most of our PhDs tend to be on the science chairs or directors, but that's not necessarily the case. There's several with masters that also have that. It really kind of comes down to how much time you've been in the organization and your skill set, and how you can make projects work. And it does split a little differently. I've noticed we do have a conservation column and we have a science column, and most of our PhDers fall within the science, but the conservation is bigger and there's more masters, but those are the people that are project managers or preserve managers, and they're definitely doing the on the ground work or management. It just may not be a direct science question that's usually outsourced. So it just kind of depends on what you're feeling, and I'll certainly echo what Diana said. I certainly just see how you're feeling. I thought for sure I was going on a PhD track, and I got halfway through my master's and was like, this is not for me. It just wasn't for academia anyway. I was pretty burnt out and knew I wanted to kind of stop there, and I was honestly a little disappointed in myself, to be honest, because I really thought that's the track that I would do. But in retrospect, I'm so glad, because I was able to workforce earlier, so it means I got a paycheck earlier. I was able to get involved with a project I really care about, and it really worked out for me. But I'm not to say, like, if you're very passionate about getting a PhD, please do it. Like, pursue what you want to do, but just check in with yourself, make sure you're noticing how you're feeling and you're doing it for you and not because you think you should. So I'll end it there.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Before I give it over to the next question, I'm going to say last call for questions. If anyone has them, get them in now would be nice. And now I'm going to let Lauren ask a question because it's one that's also been on my mind recently. So Lauren, take it away.
Double checking. Me, Lauren? There are a couple of us in here. Okay, cool. So I guess my question is mostly about how you've approached needing to move with job opportunities. Academia is notorious for, like, especially in early career, lots of like jumping between different places based on where the opportunities are. So how have you handled like the balance between like uprooting and moving and taking a job opportunity?
Well, I guess I'll go first. That's a good question. And I think it kind of depends on your stage. You know, I think early in my career, I was probably a little more flexible about where I'd move. Like, sure, yeah, I don't know anybody in Vermont, I'll move there. That sounds great. What a beautiful place. But I think as I've gotten further along, I think when I was looking for a permanent position, I either wanted to move to the Pacific Northwest or close to my family in the Midwest. So I targeted my job searches at those two locations. So, I think maybe it requires a little more patience and might be a little more anxiety producing if you're, focused on a certain geographic location for where you want your perfect job to appear. But yeah, so I guess for me, it depended on my stage and how much I felt like moving versus being in one place. But I do say, I think having moved around a lot, I think, like it has its benefits, because then, it's like I've met so many people and gotten lots of perspectives on how science is done in a lot of different places. So I think, that's been a really cool part of our job.
I think I saw Alyssa was ready to go next.
Yeah, sure. I kind of lucked out. I wanted to be in the upper Midwest with my positions, and I was able to I've had two positions within kind of the range that I wanted to be in. But I'm going to kind of echo that advice. Don't be afraid to jump around a little bit. When I was a PhD student, I had a chance to do a Fulbright in Norway. So I spent a year abroad. And that, it was a little nerve-wracking. I was doing research that was outside of my comfort zone, and going, leaving who's now my husband, I was leaving my boyfriend and, jumping overseas away from all of the comforts of home. And I was pretty nervous about that, but it turned out to be the best experience, or at least one of the best experiences that I had, and certainly put me on the trajectory to where I am now. So you know, those first positions, don't be afraid to do something outside of your comfort zone, because it can be life-changing, and it might turn out to be a lot better than you initially expected. So.
Checo, I think I saw you raise your hand earlier.
So I think, Lauren, you're asking this from a professional standpoint. I'm going to bring it back a little bit from the student standpoint, because I feel like I tell a lot of my students and a lot of instars, I guess, like students that I get to work with along SFS, like you really need to think about the willingness, right, to go where the opportunity is at. And I know it happens to me a lot with students that they're thinking about, like, well, I don't want to be away from home. I kind of want to stay in this area. And I tell them, like, no, go as far away as you can and bring all that knowledge and information back if you really want to come back to that area or that region. And I think about my example. Like, I left a tropical island to go to school. And at that time, the opportunity was there. I was able to make the best out of that opportunity, where I even got a chance to go back home to Puerto Rico to work a little bit as a postdoc. And in all those graduate school opportunities in different places, I went from El Paso, Texas to Louisiana, to Southern Illinois, then had a chance to live in Panama while I was working on my PhD, and was lucky enough that my wife was able to come with me. That all brought me the experience and the opportunities that got me to my job today. And I've been here the whole time. I've been fortunate for that too. But initially, had I not taken those opportunities, I think there would have been a lot left at the table. So I didn't think about stay at one place or just, apply for a particular region. I applied for a particular job or a particular opportunity wherever that was at. And I kind of took that same mentality coming to my academic position, and it worked out. I wouldn't imagine being anywhere else. So I've been fortunate that way too.
I mean, as I said in my intro, and maybe it's part of privilege, but I chose my personal life to drive the decisions about where we moved, and it worked out for me. Mostly because I left myself open to how the path would play out, and I wasn't so invested in a particular career path. So for those of you who are reticent about traveling or making decisions that are based more on family first than career, it can work for you. If that is your first priority, it can work for you, and it may help. I feel like I've been lucky. Maybe it doesn't work for everyone, but I want to make sure that those of you who are maybe making decisions about not moving for other reasons, that don't feel bad about that, or that it's going to constrain your career, just accept that that's your priority, and how it plays out, it plays out. And that was important to you, and that's why you made that decision, and good for you for doing it.
Cool, thank you all. Next one, I think, where was it? From Kari Snelding, I think.
Hello, it's Carrie. Hi.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. My question was pertaining to starting off in the master's, then getting a job and trying to jump back into getting a PhD, because I know in the job field you probably have a different network than you would in academia. So how difficult was it for people who kind of took that break to jump back in?
I'll go first again. I definitely took that break. Somewhat, I guess it was a little unexpectedly. I did a master's degree, and then I moved to Vermont for personal reasons, and thought I was going to start a PhD, but then ended up working for several years. But in terms of getting back into academia, I think I'd made connections in my master's degree, and so I worked with them to get some ideas and mentoring from the people I worked with during my master's to make connections. But then I actually felt like you know, the people where I applied for my PhD, they appreciated my real world experience. And so that was an asset more than a con in terms of when I was applying for a PhD.
Anybody else want to take a stab at that one? Okay. Oh, Krista?
No, I was just laughing because I was like, I don't have a PhD, but otherwise
Okay.
I'd
I think go Sam's question next.
Yeah, so I'm glad that I think Kate asked like and clarified what Soft 20 was, because the first time I heard that I was like, what are they talking about? And but I do think you know, I've heard from some faculty members and also outside of academia that securing funding can be a really stressful part of the job and like a least favorite part of it. And so I'm just curious sort of how securing your own funding, you know, potentially provides stress, but like how important is that in your career? And is there any grant writing classes or anything like that that, you know, would have been helpful before you landed in the job you're currently in?
I guess I can
go ahead.
I have to I guess we're fortunate enough at the Stroud Center that we only have to cover about 30% of our own salaries from grant proposals or grants coming in from, you know, outside of what we have, which is an endowment. That plus covering the salary for one of the at least one technician. So that is like a little bit different from academia, but I think in academia most times it's about also like 3 months what professors have to cover. And I don't think there's anything that can prepare you for that. You just, there are a lot of like writing workshops and things like that, and yes, take them if you can. I think that's great, but I guess from my perspective, I've been doing that for almost 3 years now, and it is still, you know, it is a learning process. One of the things that I learned or have learned is that starting from zero is very hard, starting from scratch, and like not having, I mean, I did write a dissertation improvement grant when I was a PhD student for the NSF, but that was like the only experience that I had. And even though, you know, I got funding for that, getting into, you know, NSF big grants is a completely different story. USDA, EPA, that kind of proposal writing is very different, and they're all very different too. So I have to say that so far I'm still learning. Maybe other more senior researchers can speak a little bit more about that, but I do think there are some other, like some skills that you can, or some practice that you can get from going to attending like workshops and things like that. But I think a very important thing is to have coworkers that you trust and you can get help from. So it's always very important having, you know, a team to work with. It's really convenient. And unfortunately, if you are in academia, that's not always that easy or the case. For me, I am very fortunate again that I have there's a science team and we'll collaborate a lot, and that helps. But so I don't know if I answered your question. Grant writing is hard. It's not my favorite thing to do for sure. But so far I'm hanging there.
I was going to add to that, Sam. So because so many programs and so many funding sources are very different. There's really not a formula driven way at times to really kind of think about the skills of like getting grants. I mean, I think one thing that is obviously helpful, I had my mentors as a student, as a graduate student, will really push me to look for funding and be creative about funding sources, even if it was, you know, what seemed like little things. It always helped, and I try to do that with my students as well. I think I heard, God, I can't remember. Mike, you might be able to help me. I don't know if it was Emma Rossi one time told me as a student at SFS, told me, hey, I got money from Budweiser. I was like, really? You can get money from a brewery? I need to try that. So I think if you're creative and looking for opportunities out there, it's something that, you know, you're always improving as you're writing. It could be the same in terms of writing manuscripts and trying to publish papers. The more you do it and the more you kind of participate in the process, even if you have the opportunity to review your friends' proposals and provide criticism and provide feedback, that's how you get more accustomed and more probably even comfortable with the writing process. I mean, obviously, I'm not in a position where I need to depend on self-money. I'm usually more worried about getting funding for my students during the summers when they're not funded. But it could be something where you're trying to, you know, get creative, collaborate with people that provide opportunities. Don't think just inside your field. Don't think just, you know, like for me, aquatic insects or something like that. Think about outreach, think about education, think about ways that you could really provide an avenue for your work to continue, and for me, for my students to get funded.
Cool.
I would just
Thank you
add
so
one
much.
small,
Oh, yes.
one small thing. But I don't have to currently write grants, but for my position, but my postdoc was at a soft money institution, and which was great in terms of training, because I got to I couldn't lead a proposal, but I got to participate in these big writing teams. And like Deanna said, and Checo, like being part of a big science team that's putting together a proposal is very educational, because you're helping write sections, or you're trying to figure out, now we have to have this data management plan, and like this is how they did that, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would echo that. Sort of trying to participate in those throughout your training is useful, because I kind of go back to that when I'm now writing proposals for my current position. Like, oh, how did they do it? They got these big NSF grants. Okay.
I'll say, so for our part, consulting is different. It's a different model, right? So ours are based on contracts. So we will compete for large multi-year contracts under which it's just like an umbrella contract through which anyone at EPA can access us to do when they have work that they need done. So it's a different model, and that is just what everyone else said. It's team-based. I learned from mentors. I learned how to do it. I learned how to write it. We also do apply for grants through like the Water Environment Research Foundation and USGS's Water Resources Research Institutes. Those are more like traditional grants. And again, I learned from my mentors and the people that are ahead of at Tetra Tech who I studied under, and then, you know, we got successful, and I just borrowed from their technique. So it was an evolution, but the model's a little different in consulting.
If I could chime in super quick, yeah, everything, that's all wonderful advice too. I think just being open to, I think in grad school and maybe beyond, you're a little bit trained to think along the traditional like NSF or those kind of pathways to get your funding. But like Checo said, we've actually had funding from Coca-Cola to install a wetland. Breweries will fund any sort of like water credit programs. You know, it's surprising what's out there. Some of our projects have been funded by federal, not so much state, because Illinois has been broke for a long time, but that's forced us to be creative. We've had funding from Grand Victoria, which is a foundation that actually gets its money from gambling offsets. And so that has to go back into conservation. So just think outside the box a little bit, and make sure if it's something that's going to be like a watershed project, for example, research-wise, just make sure you have your partners lined up and make sure you have your match as well. That will be really critical.
Cool. Well, thank you all so much. I think that's about all we have time for today. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of our panelists, everyone who attended. Yeah, thank you so much for coming tonight. Also wanted to take a minute to remind everyone of the remaining student mentor events we have. Friday at 11 to noon, we're going to have our second SFS lunch chat where we're going to continue this conversation on Twitter with questions we still have, questions we weren't able to get to tonight, things like that. We're going to pose these questions from the at SFS_SRC Twitter account, hashtag SFS lunch chat. But we'd also encourage you to continue to post your own questions using that same hashtag. Everyone, members, non-members, mentors, grad students, undergraduates, everyone's welcome to participate. And if you didn't catch last week's, highly recommend going to the SRC account and check out the conversations. I think Kate just posted links to each of those tweets from last week in the chat, so you can see the good conversations we had. And next week, I think Sam plugged this in the chat already as well, we're going to have our final mentor week, which will be Undergraduates Week, which will be geared towards mentoring undergraduates as they hopefully come into the wild world of graduate school. We have a graduate panel next week for this event, and we'll have another lunch chat next Friday as well. Again, thank you all for attending, and tune in the lunch chat whenever you can. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all so much.
Sign up for SRC. Make sure you volunteer.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, do that.
Shameless plug. Volunteer. Join us.
Shannon also dropped a link to that volunteer thing in the chat, so sign up.
Yes, please. It's fun.
Thank you, panelists, so much. That was really, really awesome.